The last customer came in after closing and asked about the son I had buried in my mind for 26 years. I had already turned off the red neon sign above Haddad's barbershop, swept the last curls of gray and brown hair into a dustpan, and lowered the heat because February in Scarborough had a way of finding every crack in an old storefront. Outside, Lawrence Avenue was blue with cold. Inside, the shop was yellow and quiet, 3 red leather chairs facing the long mirror. A small radio murmuring an old Arabic song Layla used to hum while counting the cash drawer. I was 61 years old, a widower, a barber, and a man who had learned not to keep photographs where strangers could ask questions. At 7:43 p.m., just as I reached for my coat, someone knocked once on the glass door. Not hard, not desperate, just certain. The young man standing outside wore a dark winter coat dusted with snow, and he did not look like someone who needed a haircut. He looked like someone who had practiced what he was about to say. I should have ignored him. In 24 years of running that shop, I never reopened after turning off the sign. But his eyes moved past me to the counter, to the silver comb lying beside my scissors, the one thing in the shop I never let anyone touch. I unlocked the door. The cold came in with him. He stepped inside and looked around as if the place already knew him. "Are you Samir Haddad?" he asked. His voice was calm, but his hands stayed closed at his sides. "The shop is closed," I said. He nodded, not moving. "I know. I will only take a minute." There was something in his face I could not place. Not familiar exactly. Worse than familiar. His jaw, the way he held back emotion, the slight lift of his left eyebrow. It was like seeing a memory wearing someone else's coat. "Did you ever have a son named Youssef?" The scissors slipped from my hand and hit the tile with a sound too sharp for such a small room. For 1 second, even the radio seemed to stop breathing. I looked at him, then at the comb, then at the door I should never have opened. "No," I said. "My wife and I never had children." The young man reached into his coat and placed a folded document on the counter. On the top line was my last name, Haddad. Beneath it was a name I had not spoken since the night Farid told me my little boy was gone. The young man said, "Then why does my adoption file say I was born Youssef Haddad?" For 26 years I believed my son was dead. That night, a stranger proved my grief had been built on a lie. The document on my counter did not look old enough to destroy a life. It was only 3 pages, creased at the corners, stamped by an office in Ontario, and folded so many times the paper had gone soft along the seams. The young man watched me read the first line, but I could not move past the name. Youssef Haddad. My son had been 4 years old the last time I held him. In my memory, he was always small enough to carry, warm with fever. His cheek pressed against my neck while Layla whispered prayers in the back seat of Farid Al-Khatib's car. We had arrived in Canada in 1997 with 2 suitcases, $700, and a boy who still called snow white dust. I was 32 then, thinner, louder, foolish enough to believe hard work could protect a family from everything. Layla and I rented a room above a grocery store first, then a basement near Kennedy Road where the windows were too high to see the street. I washed dishes in the mornings, shoveled snow for cash in the afternoons, and swept floors in a barbershop until the owner taught me how to hold clippers without fear. English came slowly. Bills taught me numbers. Bus signs taught me directions. Customers taught me how to smile when I did not understand the joke. Farid came into our lives wearing a wool coat and the confidence of a man who knew every office, every form, every rule. He was Syrian like us, older by a few years, already settled, already respected. He translated letters, filled out applications, found us appointments, and told me which signatures mattered. I trusted him because fear makes trust feel like survival. Layla never fully trusted him. She would lower her voice after he left and ask why every answer had to pass through his mouth first. I told her we needed help. I told her Canada was not Damascus, and pride would not feed our son. Then came the winter night Youssef got sick. His little body burned through his pajamas. The buses were slow, the sidewalks were frozen, and Farid was the only person with a car who answered the phone. At the hospital, words flew over my head like birds I could not catch. Nurses spoke. A doctor spoke. Layla cried so hard she could not stand straight. Farid took my elbow and led me into a hallway that smelled of disinfectant and wet coats. He said there had been a complication. He said the boy was gone. Now, 26 years later, The young man across from me tapped the adoption file with one finger and said, "That is not what this says." My throat closed. Behind him, the neon sign reflected backward in the glass door, glowing red against the snow. I wanted to call him a liar. I wanted to throw the papers away and return to the clean, terrible grief I understood. Instead, I looked at the date on the file. February 14th, 1998. The same date. Layla used to buy a small cake every year and never explain why. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The young man stood on one side of the counter with the file in front of him, and I stood on the other side with 26 years moving under my skin. February 14th, 1998. I had spent every year pretending that date meant nothing. Layla had not. She remembered it with cake. She remembered it with silence. She remembered it by lighting one small candle in the kitchen after I had gone upstairs, thinking I did not hear the match strike. I told myself grief had made her strange. Now I wondered if grief had made me blind. I looked at the young man again. Daniel Mercer, he had said when he first walked in, but the paper said Yusef Haddad. His hair was darker than mine had been at his age. His eyes were Layla's, steady and sad, the kind of eyes that could hold a question longer than most people could bear. "Who gave you this?" I asked. "My adoptive mother kept a copy," he said. "She passed away last spring. I found it in a box labeled medical records." He did not say it. With anger. That made it worse. Anger would have given me something to push against. His calm left me nowhere to hide. I picked up the silver comb because my hand needed a task. The initials YH were worn almost smooth near the spine. Layla had bought it from a tiny shop on Danforth Avenue when Yusef was 3, laughing because no child needed a silver comb. "One day he will be a gentleman," she had said. After the hospital, I kept it in a drawer for years. When I opened Haddad's barbershop, I placed it on the counter and told myself it was decoration. A lie can become furniture if it stays in the same place long enough. Daniel's gaze followed my hand. That belonged to him, did it not? I could not answer. The shop suddenly felt too small. The mirror showed two men facing each other, separated by a counter, a dead woman's handwriting, and a name neither of us knew how to carry. Then Daniel reached into his coat again and took out a small cloth square sealed inside a clear plastic sleeve. Faded blue cotton. Careful white stitching. 2 letters in the corner. Wait. My knees weakened before my mind understood. Layla had sewn those letters herself on the inside of Yusef's winter shirt because she was afraid daycare would lose his clothes. I remembered teasing her for it. I remembered her smiling without looking up. "In a new country," she said, "even clothes need to know where they belong." Daniel placed the cloth beside the comb. This was in my file too. I heard a car pass outside, tires hissing through slush. I heard the old heater click behind the wall. I heard my own breathing, uneven and unfamiliar. "Farad told me my son died," I said. The words came out dry, almost flat. Daniel's expression changed at Farad's name. Not surprise. Recognition. "Farad al-Khatib?" he asked. I looked up. "You know him." Daniel slipped the file back into his coat, but his eyes stayed on mine. "I came here because I am investigating him. Your name was not the first one I found." The radio crackled, then fell into static. At that exact moment, headlights swept across the front window, slow and deliberate. A dark sedan stopped outside the shop. Through the glass I saw an older man in a wool coat step out and look directly at me. Farad had come before I was ready to learn the rest. The dark sedan sat outside my shop with its headlights cutting through the front window, turning the red leather chairs pale and strange. For a few seconds, Farad al-Khatib did not come in. He only stood on the sidewalk in his wool coat, snow gathering on his shoulders, looking at me as if he had expected this night for years. Daniel saw him too. His body changed before his face did. His shoulders tightened. His right hand moved slowly toward his coat pocket, not with fear but with preparation. "Do not open the door," he said. His voice was low. I looked at him. "You said you are investigating him." Daniel nodded once. "For translation fraud, missing records, and families who lost children they were told they could not find." The words entered the room quietly, but they did not land quietly. Families. Children. Not just mine. I turned back to the window. Farad lifted one hand in a small greeting, The same polite gesture he used the first week we came to Canada, when he stood in a government office and told me to sign where he pointed. Back then I thought his calm meant safety. Now I understood calm could be a locked door. The bell above the entrance rang when he stepped inside. Cold air followed him, carrying the smell of snow and exhaust. He glanced at Daniel first, then at the cloth square on the counter, then at the silver comb. His eyes stayed on the comb 1 second too long. "Samir," he said softly, "you should have called me." I almost laughed, but the sound died before it reached my throat. "Why would I call you?" Fard removed his gloves finger by finger, buying time. He had always done that. Made small movements feel like authority. Because this young man is digging through old pain he does not understand. Daniel took out his phone and placed it face down on the counter. "I understand enough." Fard smiled without warmth. "You are young. That is not the same thing." I watched them through the mirror. 3 men in a closed barbershop. One looking for a father. One looking for an admission. One trying to keep 26 years from opening its eyes. Fard turned back to me. "Your wife suffered, Samir. You suffered. Why let a stranger disturb the dead?" The word stranger moved through me like a blade, but not sharp enough to make me lose control. I picked up the cloth square with the letters YH and held it where Fard could see. "Layla sewed this." His face did not change, but his breathing did. Only once. Only slightly. "Enough." Daniel noticed too. "My adoptive mother said it came with me," Daniel said. "From the hospital transfer." Fard looked at him then. Really looked, and something old and ugly passed behind his eyes. Not guilt. Calculation. "Many children had many things," he said. "Records from that time were messy." I opened the cash drawer beneath the counter. My hands knew the motion better than my mind did. Under the tray of coins was the envelope I had avoided since Layla died. Cream paper. Soft edges. Her handwriting. "For Samir, when the lie comes back wearing our son's face." Fard stepped forward before he could stop himself. "Do not open that." The shop went still. Even the heater seemed to hold its breath. Daniel's phone, face down on the counter, showed one small red on the screen. Recording. I looked at Fard, then at the envelope, then at the young man whose eyes were my wife's. For the first time in 26 years, I did not ask anyone to translate the room for me. I slid my finger under the seal. The seal broke with a dry whisper. For years I had cleaned around that envelope as if it were part of the shop, like the mirror, the register, the old barber pole that no longer turned. Layla had left it for me in the drawer, and I had told myself I was respecting her memory by not opening it. The truth was simpler. I was afraid my wife had carried a grief I had been too weak to share. Inside were 5 things. A photograph cut in half. A hospital discharge note. A yellowed form from a child welfare office. A typed English translation with Fard's name stamped at the bottom. And a letter folded once, written in Layla's careful hand. My fingers found the photograph first. I knew the left side because I had lived with it for 26 years. Layla and I standing outside our first apartment in Scarborough, our coats too thin, our smiles too hopeful. But the missing right side was there now, tucked behind the paper. A little boy stood between us wearing a blue winter shirt. "Youssef." Daniel stopped breathing beside me. Fard said nothing. I placed both halves together on the counter. The family I had mourned as broken became whole for 1 second beneath the yellow shop light. Then I opened Layla's letter. Her first line nearly took my legs from under me. "Samir, our son did not die that night." I read it once. Then again. The letter stayed the same. Layla wrote that after the hospital, Fard had told her a different story from the one he told me. He told me there had been a complication. He told her that I had signed papers allowing temporary care because we were poor, frightened, and did not understand the system. He told her not to upset me. He told me not to upset her. He stood between us with English in his mouth and turned our love into separate rooms. Months later, Layla found a notice hidden among old papers. Youssef had not been buried. He had been transferred. The case had moved forward without us because the office believed we had agreed. Layla confronted Fard. He warned her that reopening the file could bring immigration trouble, legal bills, and questions we could not survive. She wrote that she stayed silent because she thought silence was the last way to protect me. I looked up at Farid. He adjusted his coat sleeve, but his hand trembled. Only a little. Only enough to make me hate the years I had missed. Daniel reached for the typed translation. His voice changed when he read it. This says you declined further contact. I took the page from him. At the bottom was a signature in black ink. Samir Haddad. My name. Not my hand. I had signed thousands of receipts, leases, forms, and checks since coming to Canada. I knew the shape of my own fear on paper. This was not it. Farid finally spoke. You do not remember everything from those days. I folded the paper slowly and placed it beside the comb. I remember holding my son. My voice did not rise. It did not need to. I remember trusting you. Daniel's phone was still recording. The red dot glowed on the counter like a small, patient witness. Farid looked at it, then at me. For the first time since I had known him, the man who always had the right words could not find a safe one. Then Daniel removed one more sheet from his coat and set it beside Layla's letter. 6 names were printed there. 6 families. 6 children. Mine was only the first door opening. Daniel's list lay beside Layla's letter, and the shop no longer felt like mine. It felt like a room where the walls had been listening for years. 6 names. 6 families. 6 children. I recognized 2 last names from old appointment books, men who had sat in my chair and spoken about weather, rent, and hockey scores while carrying losses I never knew how to name. Farid looked at the list and gave a tired sigh, as if we had disappointed him by uncovering something impolite. You think a piece of paper explains those years? He asked. You were new. You were poor. You had no English. The system would have swallowed you. Daniel stepped closer to the counter. So you helped it swallow them first? Farid's eyes sharpened. Careful, young man. The words were soft, but the old control was still there, trained by decades of people lowering their heads when he spoke. I had been one of them. I remembered government waiting rooms with plastic chairs, my hat in my hands, Farid leaning over forms while I nodded like a child. I remembered him telling me signatures were just procedure. I remembered Layla asking for copies and Farid laughing gently, saying, Sister, too many papers will only confuse you. All those moments returned, not as memories but as evidence. Daniel turned his phone slightly so the red recording dot faced Farid. 3 of the families on this list say you translated documents they were never allowed to read. One woman in North York still believes her daughter was moved because she missed a court date. She did not miss it. The notice was mailed to your office. Farid's face hardened. You know nothing about sacrifice. That word opened something in me. Sacrifice. Men like Farid loved that word because it made other people's pain sound noble. I picked up the forged document and held it under the light. This is not sacrifice. This is theft. My voice sounded older than I felt, but steadier. You did not protect my son from poverty. You protected yourself from the truth. Farid looked at Daniel, then at me. You would have lost him anyway. A barber with no language, no money, no family here. I did what had to be done. Daniel went still. Not angry. Still. How many children? He asked. Farid said nothing. Snow tapped against the glass like small fingernails. The radio crackled again. Then an old song returned, Layla's song, faint and stubborn. I opened the appointment drawer beneath the register and pulled out the oldest book I still had, from the year 2002. My hands moved before I understood why. There, in blue ink, was one of the names from Daniel's list. A man named Nabil Rahman. He had come every second Friday for 15 years and always tipped $2, even when his coat was patched at the elbows. I remembered him once touching the empty chair beside him and saying his daughter would have liked the mirrors in my shop. I had smiled politely because I did not know what to say. Now I knew. Daniel looked at the page, then at me. The air between us changed. My grief was no longer private. It had witnesses. Farid reached for the list, but I placed my palm over it. The movement was small. The meaning was not. For the first time since I came to Canada, I did not move aside for him. He pulled his hand back. Daniel picked up Layla's letter and folded it carefully, as if it belonged to both of us now. Then he said the sentence that turned the night from my tragedy into something larger. Samir, your wife found more than your son. She found the pattern. And I think Farid knew she was close. Daniel's words made Farid look older. Not weaker, just older, as if the years he had hidden behind clean coats and careful speech had finally stepped into the light with him. He glanced at Layla's letter in Daniel's hand, then at the appointment book under my palm. Your wife was grieving, he said. Grief makes people imagine patterns. I knew that voice. He had used it on frightened fathers, tired mothers, and men like me who thought. A confident tone meant truth. But Layla's handwriting was not grief. The hospital note was not grief. The forged signature was not grief. 6 names on Daniel's list were not grief. She came to you, did she not? I asked. Farid looked away for half a second. That was his confession before his mouth could ruin it. I saw Layla in our kitchen 8 months before she died, sitting at the table after midnight with papers spread in front of her, her tea cold, her reading glasses low on her nose. When I asked what she was doing, she smiled and said she was sorting receipts. I had believed her because I wanted an easy answer. Now Daniel unfolded the last page from Layla's envelope. It was not a letter. It was a photocopy of a note written in hurried English, with Farid's office address printed at the top. Daniel read it aloud slowly. If you continue asking families about the children, you will hurt people who have already survived enough. He stopped and looked at Farid. This was sent to Layla 3 weeks before her final hospital stay. Farid spread his hands. A warning is not a crime. No, Daniel said. But hiding files from families is. Forging consent is. Misdirecting official notices is. And threatening a sick woman into silence tells me you knew exactly what you were doing. The room tightened around us. I did not need Daniel to say more. I remembered Layla's last winter, how she stopped answering calls when I entered the room, how she asked me once whether I would hate her if she had made a mistake trying to protect me. I had kissed her forehead and told her not to speak like that. I thought I was comforting her. I was closing the last door she had been trying to open. Farid buttoned his coat. You have an emotional story, he said. That is all. No court will rebuild the past for you. I picked up the silver comb and placed it in Daniel's hand. His fingers closed around it carefully like it might break. Maybe not, I said. But the past is not the only thing you stole. Farid frowned. I turned the appointment book toward him and tapped Nabil Rahman's name. Tomorrow I call him. Then the next family. Then the next. Farid's face finally changed. Not much. Just enough to show fear under the polish. Daniel put Layla's papers into his folder. And I am taking this recording to the legal clinic tonight. Farid looked at the phone, then at the door, then back at me. For the first time since I had met him in 1997, he did not tell me what to do. He simply walked out into the snow. The bell above the door gave one small ring behind him. I watched his sedan pull away from the curb, and when the taillights disappeared, Daniel whispered, "Why did she not tell you sooner?" I looked at Layla's empty chair near the register, the one where she used to sit on slow afternoons, folding towels and correcting my English. Because we both thought silence was protection, I said. And we were both wrong. After Farid left, the shop did not feel quiet. It felt emptied. The kind of empty that comes after someone removes a wall, and you realize the room was always larger than you were told. Daniel stood near the counter with the silver comb in his hand, turning it once, then stopping when the initials caught the light. Wait. He looked at them the way a person looks at an old address, wondering if he had once belonged there. I wanted to say his name. Not Daniel. The other one. The name Layla and I had whispered over a crib in a basement apartment near Kennedy Road. But my tongue would not move. A father should not need permission to say his son's name, yet I did. 26 years had turned blood into a question. Daniel placed the comb back on the counter. Not rejecting it. Not accepting it. Just giving both of us more time. My mother in Mississauga was good to me, he said. She made lunches. She came to parent-teacher nights. She stayed up when I had the flu. I do not want her turned into a footnote. I nodded. She should not be. His eyes moved to the photograph on the counter. The two halves joined under the yellow light. Then what am I supposed to do with this? He asked. Be grateful? Be angry? Call you my father because a paper says so? The words were not cruel. They were honest, which hurt more cleanly. I sat in the nearest red chair, suddenly too tired to stand. In the mirror, I saw an old barber with snow melting on the floor behind him, and a grown man who had once been carried into a hospital wearing blue cotton and fever. I do not know, I said. I have been a father only in grief. I do not know how to be one in front of you. Daniel looked away, but he did not leave. That was the first mercy of the night. I opened Layla's letter again and found the last page, the one my eyes had avoided because her handwriting grew weaker near the bottom. If he finds you, she had written, do not ask him to forgive us first. Ask him if he ate. My throat tightened so hard I had to place the paper down. Daniel noticed. What does it say? I folded the page once, then unfolded it because hiding had already cost us too much. Your mother asked me to ask whether you ate today. Daniel blinked. For a second, the man in front of me disappeared, and I saw the child Layla had been trying to reach through all those years of silence. He gave a small laugh that broke before it finished. I had coffee at noon, he said. That is not eating. The answer came from me without thought, in the exact tone Layla used when I skipped dinner at the shop. Daniel pressed his fingers to his eyes and turned toward the window. Outside, a city bus sighed at the curb and pulled away into the blue cold. Inside, the radio played low, the heater clicked, and neither of us moved. Finally, he said, my birthday is February 14th. I looked at the small cake date Layla had carried alone for years and understood the shape of her sorrow. She knew, I said. Every year she knew. Daniel picked up the comb again. This time he did not put it down. Daniel kept the silver comb in his hand while the old clock above the mirror moved past midnight. Neither of us said the word son. Neither of us said father. Some words need a place to land, and ours had spent too many years in the dark. I gathered Layla's papers, the photograph, the forged document, the list of families, and Daniel's recording phone. I placed everything in a clean envelope from the drawer where I kept tax receipts and shop insurance forms. Ordinary things. Safe things. My hands had signed thousands of papers in Canada. But that night was the first time I understood that a signature could be a wound or a beginning. Daniel watched me write Farid al-Khatib on the front of the envelope. Below it I wrote 6 family names. Then I added one more. Haddad. Daniel looked at it for a long time. What happens tomorrow? He asked. I looked at the dark window, where our reflections stood side by side in the glass. Tomorrow we call the legal clinic. Then we call Nabil Rahman. Then we call every family Layla found. He nodded, but his face was still guarded. I did not mistake that for coldness. A man who has carried an empty space all his life does not fill it in one night. He lifted his collar and turned toward the door. That was when I noticed the back of his hair, uneven near the neckline, as if someone had cut it in a hurry. It was a small thing. Almost nothing. But love often returns first through almost nothing. May I fix that? I asked. Daniel stopped with his hand on the door. He looked at me through the mirror. The silence lasted long enough for me to regret asking. Then he removed his coat and sat in the red leather chair. I placed the white cape around his shoulders. My hands trembled once, then steadied. The scissors made a soft sound in the warm light. Outside, Scarborough was blue and frozen. Inside, the radio played low, and my son sat beneath my hands for the first time since he was 4 years old. When I finished, Daniel touched the back of his neck and gave a small nod. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But not refusal either. At the door, he handed me a card with his personal number written on the back. Do not call in the morning, he said. Call when the shop closes. I held the card like Layla had placed it there herself. Daniel stepped into the snow, then turned back. Did you ever close late for me? I looked at the red neon sign still glowing above the glass. Every night, I said. I just did not know your name anymore. He walked toward the bus stop, carrying the comb in his pocket. I stayed inside, watching until the cold swallowed his shape. Then I turned the lock, but I did not switch off the sign. Some men cannot repair the years stolen from them, but they can keep the door open one more night.